welcome back to the Life, Liberty, and Pursuit of Happiness Project. I'm really excited to have another interview to bring to you. I have a couple of friends with me today, going back many years to when I was a teenager. We were all teenagers, I should say. Mike and Lindsay Jenkins. Go ahead and say hi, Mike and Lindsay.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Lindsay.
That would make me Mike.
Good. So, like I said, Mike and Lindsay and I have known each other for years. They each have their own jobs, and we'll talk a little bit. Lindsay, I think mostly Lindsay, but I know Mike helps with it at least. I'm not sure.
He does the podcast with me. Yep.
Yeah. So, wasn't sure exactly the division of labor there, but Lindsay has her own project, her own side hustle going with the Elusive Follow-Through. And so we'll definitely spend some time talking about that. But Mike and Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves? And you can, if you don't mind, share with us where people can find the Elusive Follow-Through online or anywhere else that people can connect with you.
Yeah.
So my name's Mike. I help with the podcast, and she could probably tell you the rest.
My podcast would not be nearly as cool without him. But my name's Lindsay Jenkins, and I started the Elusive Follow-Through back in November of 2018. It started out as just kind of a side thing. My hope was that I could turn it into something giant and make all the money with it, and Mike could quit work, and that would be our one source of income. But that has never happened because I really struggled with trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Initially, the Elusive Follow-Through, so the name came to me because I was always starting projects and then never finishing them. And like I would start some new cool thing and do it for like a few weeks, and then we wouldn't follow through on it. And it was, chore charts around the house, or getting our kids to actually help do things, or some new diet plan that we wanted to try, or some new training routine or something. And I would always just start these and then never finish. And I thought for sure there must be other people out there like me. And
90% of America. Yeah.
Right.
And I thought maybe I could use this to figure out how to finally follow through on stuff, and then I can help other people do the same thing. And I mean, I put a lot into it, and it's still going pretty well. I mean, we have this blog website, and I have courses in the works, and Mike and I do a podcast, like I said, and you can look it up at theelusivefollowthrough.com. It's TheElusiveFollowThrough.
The only one I know that can spell that just like that.
Because I've typed it a zillion times. But anyway.
I'd be like,
I know, it's not nice and short like Garrett's with the LLPHP.org. It's so much easier to remember. But yeah, I mean, you can look it up on Google and it'll bring it up too. That works. But you can find me on Facebook at the same name. We're on all the podcasts like Spotify and Google Play and Apple as the Elusive Follow-Through. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram. But on Instagram, I'm at Minimal Mama Lindsay. So that's kind of a nutshell, but I do feel like in order to know the full story, we have to start when I was a teenager, honestly.
Why do we have to start there?
Because that's kind of when I was 16, I was diagnosed with depression, and I think that is what contributes big time to my lack of following through on things.
You think so?
And I do.
That's interesting. I've never heard anyone connect those two, or that I can think of off the top of my head at least.
Yeah.
I know for Lindsay, she gets excited about something. She wants to try it. She jumps into it with both feet. And I think her depression plays into it. Like if she has a setback, it's more detrimental
Yeah.
to her and her condition versus other people maybe.
Depression tends to, in my experience, depression
Sure,
tends
sure.
to make you go big or go home. That's kind of my personality. And when something doesn't work out the way that I planned, or, some little snag comes, then I'm like, oh, forget it. Why did I even try?
This will never work.
It'll never work. I'm just going to quit. And because it's so much easier to quit, And, when I was a teenager, your self-worth gets kind of, when you're in high school, it's hard enough, man. But when you also have emotional instability, mental health problems, it makes it even worse.
Sure.
And so that's kind of what started me on the path of doing big things and then not following through.
I've done that so much myself. I can't even tell you.
Do you think maybe, I don't know, do you have any, I'm not getting personal here, but would you be able to relate? Can you relate?
I can relate. Yes.
Okay.
I would say I've experienced bouts of depression through my life, and I know it's definitely harder to even get started when I'm feeling depressed.
Yeah.
With coronavirus, I know a lot of people have been struggling with their mental health the last year and a half or so.
Yeah.
I know for some reason, August last year was really hard for me. Like for about half the month of August, I pretty much just vegged. Like I was able to get out of bed, but once I was out of bed, I didn't really do a whole lot. It was pretty much binging Netflix all day, every day for a couple of weeks there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can relate. And, a lot of people that I know, most of the people that I'm close to have some sort of mental health issue, whether that be depression or anxiety or both, or ADHD, or
Right.
it's so much more common than people think.
It is.
And
And
in
yet
fact,
people don't, go ahead. Well, people don't talk about it. And it drives me crazy.
Well,
no,
people don't talk about it because just like with your apprehension earlier, do you have,
Yeah.
is there, can you relate? It's because you don't want to hurt his
You don't wanna
feelings. You
hurt
don't want to
anyone.
pry.
Yeah, you don't want to pry.
Yeah, you don't want to open the box,
Yeah.
So I get it.
But I interrupted you.
it's all good. So I'm glancing at my phone right now, which I don't usually do during an interview or while we're recording or anything, but this is totally relevant because May is actually Mental Health Month. And so just this morning on my social media for the Life, Liberty, and Pursuit of Happiness Project, I shared a thing about Mental Health Month, and a couple of the hashtags that are popular with sharing on that subject right now are break the stigma and break the silence. And really that's such a huge thing for me, having known so many people who experience depression and other mental health issues, is that stigma that there is. And I really want to do away with that. I want people to understand that there doesn't need to be a stigma. There's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. And it should be something that we talk about, and that's just as common as discussions about physical health, because mental health concerns are just as important as and as common as physical illness.
I agree.
Maybe even more so.
Yeah.
But and asking you to relate, and that's one thing that Mike and I we've touched on it a little bit on our podcast in some of the episodes, and but Mike does not have depression. He has moments like you were saying where he feels depressed.
Yeah, they're probably situational though.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's
life's got me beat down versus
right.
I don't care.
Right. Like for me, someone can look at my life and be like, oh my gosh, you have this charmed life, you have these great kids, you have an awesome job, you have so much going for you. Why the heck are you sad? And it's like, I couldn't tell you. I honestly couldn't tell you. And that's kind of the frustrating for Mike, because he's like, how do I help you? Mike's a fixer. And he's like, how do I fix this? And I'm like, you can't fix it. And he gets
Let me get my tool bag.
He gets so frustrated because he can't fix it.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that is difficult for those of us who are fixers, is coming to terms with the fact that there are things that you can't fix. And sometimes the best you can do is to be supportive and show your care and your concern and your love for people and be patient with them, and just be understanding, because sometimes that's all you can do. You can't fix it, but you can support someone through it.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, so that's kind of the origin story of Elusive Follow-Through.
Okay.
So I suppose if I had to give you my one-liner, it would be that I'm trying to teach moms with depression how I'm trying to give them tools and knowledge to help them to enjoy their motherhood and to not let that depression control their lives. I guess that would kind of be my one-liner.
And I'm here for comic relief.
Well, good. I can see some evolution there, because I think in the past, I don't think I've heard you get that specific, Lindsay, as far as depression and that kind of thing. I've always heard you talk about supporting moms and that sort of thing with the Elusive Follow-Through. But I think you're kind of getting a little bit more specific now. I think that's good.
You're right. It is. It's evolving quite a bit.
Good. So before we go too much further, I appreciate the background of where you came from with struggling with depression and things like that, and how that fit into creating the Elusive Follow-Through. Let's go back to kind of that same time frame.
Okay.
16, 17. I think it would be really good for people, really fun, entertaining, but also good for people to get to know you and Mike and hear your story, the two of you meeting and going from there.
Okay. You want to start?
She saw me for the first time. She says, I was in a parking lot doing Brody's and beer cans fell out of my car.
Even though they weren't beer
When
cans.
I was 16.
You were 17.
17. So, and then all of her friends were like, stay away from him. So apparently that's the first time she was introduced to me.
I tell the story so much better.
Do it. That's my method. I suck at telling stories so that she can just tell them.
Okay. So when Mike was 16, he decided to blow up his house in Portland. And if you want to hear this story, this is all over. It's on our podcast and in my blog. But his house in Portland blew up, essentially, and burned to the ground. In 4 minutes flat, this big, giant 4-story house burnt to the ground. And his dad at the time had been working in Salem. So anyone who's familiar with the Portland and Salem area, they know that Portland is about 45 minutes north of Salem. And so his dad was commuting
That's on
down
a really good day.
on a really good day.
Good day.
Back in 1997.
Yeah, back in the late 1900s.
When traffic wasn't nearly as bad.
Yeah.
But anyway.
When you had to contend with horse and buggies.
Yeah. So his dad would drive down to Portland, or to Salem every day from Portland to work. And so after the house burnt down, they were like, well, we have nowhere to stay here in Portland. And so I think we need to move to Salem. And at the time, Mike was 17, his little brother Chris was 15, and they both just kind of, I think you could have stayed, right? You could have
with friends and stuff,
with friends or whatever, but
I felt a responsibility to help my mom.
Because he felt responsible for the house. It wasn't his fault at all, but he felt responsible for the house. And so he moved down with them. And they moved into this little house out in the middle of nowhere, just off of the Salem-Dallas highway. And they happened to move into our ward. So any of your listeners who are familiar with the church, we grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we have wards, which are basically local congregations. And Mike and his family moved into our ward in West Salem. And so the first night I met him, it was in January of 1997.
I didn't even know it was cold outside.
I was 17. And my little brother Adam and I pulled into the parking lot of our church. Every Tuesday or Wednesday night we had an activity, youth activity. At the time it was called Mutual. And I was the president of the older girls class, the 17 and 18-year-olds. And we saw them out there doing the Brodies in the parking lot, and Adam was like, did you see that? Like, some pop cans it was probably pop cans, but like, he was like, I just swear I heard beer cans fall out of their car.
I don't think there was cans at all.
Who are those guys? And then we were just like, whatever. So we went inside, and I did something or other. And then I went into the gym, and Mike and Chris were in the gym playing basketball. And all the other boys, I don't know, Garrett, if you were on the stage, I don't know, but all the other boys
I was there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. But they were all just kind of sitting on the stage watching these two new guys. And I remember Mike, he looked like he was like 20 or something. And I remember thinking, what the heck is this guy doing here? He's way too old to be at this activity. And then I saw his little brother Chris, who looked to be more my age. And so I was like, oh, okay, he's more my age. I think he's kind of cute, but the other guy, he's kind of cute, but...
What's that old guy doing here?
He was way too old. So I'm like, you guys need to come we're going to start, and they just kind of ignored me, but everyone just kind of, got off the stage and like, okay. And they came in and we started doing opening exercises. And I remember very distinctly... So I was leading the opening exercises because I was the president of our class, and my dad was speaking in a fireside. We call it a fireside, but it's like a gathering of youth once every quarter or something, and my dad was the speaker for this particular one, and it was coming up. And I said, guys, don't forget, the fireside is this coming Sunday, and or whenever it was, and I go, hopefully all of you will be there. And Mike, who was standing in the back of the room, probably trying to look cool.
I was cool.
And he goes, well, I'll be there if you're there.
Make me sound like a doofus.
And I was just like, because I didn't usually get much attention. Garrett, you were one of my very best friends, you and Martin and Steve. And these were my three, guy friends, and they paid attention to me because they were kind and wonderful. But none of the other, boys in the ward, they were kind of, I don't know, they weren't the nicest.
Moving on. And
Mike, totally, he paid attention to me, and it was weird. I never really...
Well, look at her.
Yeah. Anyway, and so I was like, whoa, this guy's kind of cute, but he's still way too old to be here.
Get away from me, creepy old man.
Anyway, so we just kind of hung out and talked, and we, became friends, and then one day after school, my friend Jenny Van Leeuwen convinced me to call him and ask him out on a date. And so I did, thinking that nothing would come of it. And I called and I was like, hey, this is Lindsay from church. And I'll let you tell what you were thinking at the time.
She makes fun of me all the time. But at that moment on the phone, I wasn't quite sure who it was. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go.
He didn't
Let's
know.
go.
He
Let's
didn't
go.
know it was me. He didn't know who I was. So I'm like,
Some chick was calling me. She wanted to hang out. Okay.
come over, we'll go to the Gov Cup. And that was this place that we love to go in downtown Salem and have some hot chocolate. So he came to pick me up, and he says that when he came to the door and it was me that answered, he was glad because he says he had been hoping it was me, but I don't know. Anyways, so we went to the Gov Cup and hung out for a few hours and talked, and after that, he lost my number. He lost my number for like 3 or 4 days, and I thought for sure that he was never going to call.
This was a time before cell phones.
Yeah. And I was actually on the phone with you, Garrett. I was on the phone with you, and we were just chatting, and then I hear the doorbell ring, and Mike's at the door, and he's like, I lost your number, but I did want to get together, and I was like, okay, Garrett, I'll talk to you later. On the phone. And then Mike and I just started hanging out from then on. So that's the origin story. Really long story for not a lot that happened. I like to make long story.
No, I remember those days. I remember that first night that Mike and Chris showed up. And I remember I didn't know Mike, and so I didn't have a read on him. But Lindsay, I knew from almost the moment you laid eyes on him, I knew you were smitten.
And it was. I think, and it's funny, I can remember at the time, a lot of my friends, Garrett, you were one of the few who actually took time to get to know Mike and Chris. And you and Chris actually became pretty good friends.
Chris lived with him for a while.
Yeah, Chris lived with Garrett for a little while. But a lot of the other people in the ward told me to stay away from Mike. He's, a bad kid, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I was given the ability to see past
the rust and mold.
The rough exterior, and to see who he had the potential to become. And I was grateful that I had been given that gift, because I'm glad I didn't listen to my parents. My dad was actually pretty supportive, but my mom did not. She wanted me to stay away from him, but I'm glad that. So we ended up actually getting married about 2 years later. We got married in January of '99. So we've been together now for a little over 22 years. 24 years together, 22 years married. And we got 4 great kids, and I would love to say that it's been wonderful and perfect, but it definitely has not. You have your ups and downs.
I suppose that's my fault.
You have your ups and downs, and but it's been good.
For sure. So yeah, you were talking about how you believe in people having the opportunity to change and giving people a chance and things like that. I absolutely feel that same way. And sometimes people do change and sometimes they don't. But I think it's only fair to try to give them that opportunity. That's one thing I've strived for in my life, is to see, to try to see the best in people and to treat them according to their potential and their who they can be, as opposed to who they may seem to be.
Right. And not everyone's going to change. I think that's something that we need to accept in general. We want to be able to look at people and think, oh, he's going to change. And I think, it's not always going to end up like this, this story. Like I said, Mike and I have been through a lot. He says that most of it was him, but it was equally me. And that had a lot to do with my depression, like I said. During those first few years of our marriage, I mean, you wouldn't know it really to look at us now, because we actually do have a pretty good relationship now. I mean, there are moments where, we're both like, ah. But in the beginning, I mean, I can remember times where I would throw, pots or pans, or even, I think I may have thrown a butter knife, nothing ever really sharp, But like when we'd have our fights, I would be throwing things at him and trying to punch him and feeling just helpless. And that time was right after Audrey was born, my first baby, and I had really bad postpartum depression in addition to my regular depression. And we went through a lot of struggles at that time. We were seeing a marriage counselor, and we both weren't the happiest, we could say, if you want to put it nicely. But you work through it, and after our second baby was born, Dallin, who's now going to be turning 18 here in a few days.
Yep.
It's crazy. But when he was born, we moved to Utah. And that was probably one of the best things that we could have done for our marriage, because my parents lived right up the street when we were in Salem. And as much as I love my mom, if you're listening, Mommy, I love you very, very much. But she tends to kind of get a little over-involved sometimes, and especially when it comes to grandkids. And so, and my sister also, my older sister, was living with us at the time. And there was just a lot of struggles because of that. And we needed to be able to rely on each other. And so we moved to Utah. And we knew my sister, but she was busy, doing her own thing. And so Mike and I had to rely on each other. We didn't know anybody else, and we had to kind of build our life from scratch in a way,
So I think, thinking back and viewing now, is the situation we were in with Lindsay's family, because her sister was renting like an addition to our house, and
that was before Dallin was born.
Yeah, and your family up the street, and close friends and stuff. It put Lindsay in a awkward like corner between me and them, and it was unfair to her, and it was incredibly imbalanced. So moving to another state sort of took that imbalance away, to where the only people we had to fight with were ourselves. And it didn't take long to run out of stuff to fight with, or about. I mean, we came up with new things every once in a while, but it wasn't a constant battle for her or for me, because I didn't feel like she was getting worked on from the other side. She didn't feel like she was in between. It was a good thing to have that separation.
Yeah, and I think what Mike's saying is like, my mom would make requests of me or my sister or somebody that Mike didn't agree with. And so then I would feel torn because I wanted to please my mom, but I also knew that I needed to, cleave unto my husband or whatever and make him happy. And so it was really hard to feel like, you have to choose between one or the other. Mm-hmm. So.
It's unfair. It's unfair.
But that was, 17 years ago, I think, that we moved to Utah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been kind of all over. Anyway.
That's interesting. I wasn't around for part of that. But
yeah, you were on your mission, I think.
Yep, I was spending most of that time in Kentucky. Good times. But I think it's really interesting that what, in large part, helped your marriage was kind of the two of you starting over together,
Yes.
away from others.
Away from familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had both been there for, by that time, it was 5 years that we had been together in Salem, married, and 7 years together. And we needed to be able to build our own life that wasn't reminiscent of my childhood or his, teenhood, or, where people didn't have the preconceived notions of what kind of a person he was or what kind of a person I was or should be or whatever, and where we could just kind of figure out.
The only people we had that we could rely on were each other.
Yeah. It built quite a team.